Here is the distinction between psychology and spirituality. Psychology is all about deeply personalizing the content of your mind. I have this kind of fear because of my childhood trauma. I now need to resolve my relationship with my parents. It all becomes extremely personal, and here spirituality tells us none of this is personal. Stop personalizing it, because this is exactly the root of your suffering. Psychology can help you to alleviate pain, but it cannot liberate you. For this, you have to radically approach your thinking as absolutely no personal content and no personal value. This is where you begin to radically free yourself. So what we need to do is actually to lift the veils. We need to remove the veils and to begin to look into ourselves, into who we already are, because, well, who we already are, well, it surpasses all identities. If I needed to pinpoint humanity's problem, I would say that it's the problem of
there goes a sight from my soul.
Welcome to the Inspired Evolution. And today, strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a treat. We have with us Shai Tubali. How are you, Shai?
I'm doing very well and so happy to be here with you.
It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you. For those that are tuning into Shai for the first time, give me 2 seconds. I'm just about to do the honors. It's very hard to encompass what Shai does into a few sentences. He's the author of 10 books. They've been translated into 5 languages. He's dedicated himself to self-development and ultimately the self-empowerment of others. He's a master at combining psychology, philosophy, yogic traditions, and Eastern thought and practices into powerful processes, ultimately for inner transformation. And I can't wait to dive into these conversations around these topics here today, Shai. Such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. I wanted to start a little bit on your journey, because I think, look, it's a bit of a sticky topic, and I'm conscious about how much time we have, but I'm going to go straight into it. They say we teach others what we want most for ourselves, and it must have been quite a realization for yourself that as you got clearer on your life, you're here to help others get clearer on their life, because clarity for life is a whole thing. And I speak from a place of, it was quite a slippery realization from my mind when, for me, I realized my purpose was to help others find their purpose. And it was like, oh, but why is it dependent on somebody else? That feels so, like my mind really struggled with that. And I know we're going to talk a lot about the mind today. But yeah, for yourself, when you started to realize that, as I'm getting clearer, it's to afford others clarity. How was that realization for you, and how has that been? Has that been something that's always been present, or when did that precipitate? How did it precipitate? How did it feel?
Well, I would say that the journey of dedicating my life to helping others began with my own revelation of cosmic consciousness. This took place when I was only 23. I think I was not ready for this kind of revelation. Nevertheless, it happened, and it was under the guidance of a certain teacher. And at a certain point, I just realized that myself, as I had believed existed, actually was non-existent, and there was, well, no separation between my own consciousness and the consciousness of the universe. So this inaugurated a process of endless bliss, unconditional love, tears, laughter, and actually 1 year of silence in which I had to withdraw from the world, because I just couldn't fathom what was taking place. You see, so but at the end of this process, not that it has ever ended really, at the end of this process, I stood on a junction. On the one hand, I could simply renounce the world find some secluded place and just write books, forget all about others.
Be
On the other
renunciate.
hand,
Yep.
exactly, which was very tempting.
Okay.
Yes, and then because you just want to become absorbed in this silence, you see, forever. But on the other hand, there was the humanity and there was the suffering others. And then I simply knew that my heart couldn't say no to this task, although it would be burdensome, I knew. And ever since, I would say that when you realize this kind of realization, you experience yourself as completely available. It's like life is no longer for you. You see, it's as if your own autobiography has been disrupted, discontinued, and now all is left for you is basically to open your heart to others suffering and to help them realize the same. So this has been my life task, helping people to realize their higher states of consciousness in order to be able to ultimately embrace their life, embrace life's challenges, and illuminate every dimension of their existence.
So special to hear you say that, and thank you so much for sharing that. There's a lot in there that even that, just unpacking what you've just shared there, is enough to go into a whole hour-long podcast. And I'm tempted to do that, but obviously I've got my own intentions for the episode as well. So we'll try and dance between it all. And for those that are tuning in, guys, I have to say there are some epic, and when I say epic, I mean epic satsangs by Shai available on YouTube for free of cost, and they go for an hour or two, and they're totally worth tuning into. There is such a healing in the clarity that Shai helps you achieve. So my question is going to be, when you started to rewinding a little bit into probably the first point that you shared in there was the dissolution of self into this expanded oneness that you experienced. It's quite the gift, and it doesn't happen for everybody, which there's a whole conversation around why or why not. We can discuss that, but the key thing for me is actually when I personally feel into that dissolution of oneness, dissolution of self into oneness, there is a fear, and yet you mentioned bliss. And so I'd like to understand, ask the question around, why do you think it is that we fear our own dissolution if there is bliss on the other side in oneness?
Well, we need to differentiate between two things. You see, two parts of ourselves. One is the ego or thought, and the other is our true self, as the Hindus as the Hindus call Atman. So the true self, the universal self. Now, thought is afraid of its own dissolution because all it knows well is its own continuity. You see, it doesn't know what lies beyond it, and it cannot even grasp it or contain it. It's bigger than thought. So what happens is that when we feel that we are afraid, we need to begin to distinguish this fearful thought from who we are. You see, we are not afraid. We are actually drawn to this universal core as if to a magnet. You see, but then we become identified with thought, and thought screams, "I don't want to die." Now this happens exactly just before we close our eyes and breathe our last. You see, because we don't know what exists beyond us because we've never investigated into that. So the thing is, and this is what thought doesn't want you to know, and that what awaits you is not the dread of death, but actually the beginning of life. You see, life exists or reveals itself only at the end of thought. But for this, you have to dare and to take the step. Otherwise, you will never realize that for yourself. You will always believe thought when it tells you that it's death that awaits you beyond the end of thought, you see?
Do you think the courage is a necessary ingredient and the fear is there as a hurdle on purpose, or it's just a function of the mind and we're just waiting to step into that?
Is it courage?
Yeah, well, the courage is a necessary ingredient, is what I've heard you share. But is the fear a necessary part of the human experience too? Like, I do still wonder about the function of why we feel that fear if our innate sense is bliss and oneness, and yet we have so much fear to go across it. Yeah, it makes me wonder why that fear is there in the first place. And you're saying it's the mind and the challenges that it experiences in terms of its own dissolution, because all it knows is thought. Yeah?
Yes, the thing is, and perhaps we will be exploring this point of what I call the thinking machine. And the thing about fear is that this is not my fear, this is not your fear. You see, there is a certain innate fear that is a part of what, as you put so nicely, the human condition. And the human condition is that we, well, it's identification, complete identification with this body, with this name and with this form. We are so confident that this is who we are, that, well, when this is threatened, when its limits are threatened, then we receive signals of danger. You see, this is at the instinctual level. It's we receive the signal of danger that there is death ahead, that this is going to be so terrible, that this is going to be our ending.
Run.
But the only thing that ends is thinking and fear. You see, this is the only thing that ends. The only thing that really can end is your identity, and that's it.
That's it. There's a whole conversation to be had around identity and the mind, and I think the question I want to ask though is, with our just the irony, I guess. I don't even want to ask a question. I just want to remark on the irony of so many of us have. Even I struggle with negative self-talk at times, and I can feel myself berating myself, and yet the irony that is the self that I'm afraid of letting go of. It's quite a
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yes, because we are afraid of losing something that is the source of endless suffering, right?
I wish I didn't have to say right, but right. It's a really interesting conundrum that we're in. The human conditioning as well. You speak to it quite eloquently in the body of your work, in saying that we're not the doers and the choosers of our life, and you were touching on human conditioning already. And the thing that I found really interesting is you articulate it so clearly that when we're doing these things that are like a condition to us as humans, it becomes automatic for our subconscious. Now, that I was only really able to put that so succinctly because I've been tuning into your work. Prior to that, like, I understand that we're in, society programs us, our family programs us, the collective that we're in programs us. But being able to say that collective programming actually automates our unconscious and how that runs our life, I'd love for you to expand upon that at this particular juncture in the conversation, because that was very concisely put, and I think it's really helpful to have those concise models in our head when we're walking around in our day-to-day life, because it helps us navigate the terrain with a lot more grace.
Right. So let's begin to explore what I term the thinking machine.
Please.
In greater depth, right? Because I would I love your enthusiasm. I would say that there is a certain again, without sounding too dramatic, there is a certain monster-like entity that governs humanity. You see, we're always worried about AI doing exactly this in the future, right? That at a certain point we will become governed by a certain artificial intelligence, but actually there is a certain monster, one that is not externally produced, but that the humanity has created, has given rise to. It's like a spider that weaves a web and then gets caught in it. You see. So now the thing is that if we go back in time for a moment, somewhere in prehistoric times, the capacity of thinking was pretty useful. You see, it was a sort of survival mechanism that combined instinct and thinking. Now, what happens when you combine instinct and thinking? You receive this kind of long-term or thinking or thinking toward the future, planning. You see? I'm not sure I can hear you.
Sorry, I was saying I can see the tiger by the river at midday every day. I can plan and think about not to go there at midday time for the subsequent days. Yeah. Yes.
So then thinking was for the sake of predicting and anticipating dangers, including registering events, registering your impressions, avoiding predators, producing tools. But then at a certain point, when thinking was less needed for immediate and actual dangers, it began to become self-destructive. You see, then it began to predict dangers that are not really there, including dangers that are mental and emotional, scenarios that will never happen. And then it began to produce this kind of ceaseless anxiety and worry and continuous search for the perfect conditions, always looking for the perfect conditions, that there should be no disturbance whatsoever, how to avoid pain altogether, looking for pleasure persistently and frantically, and controlling every single moment, you see, not letting anything escape your control. So now what happens is that we live, as you so beautifully put, unconsciously with this kind of undercurrent, because you see the real danger is not our surface thinking, but the thinking behind our thinking. There are deeper thoughts that constitute the thinking machine. So this thinking machine is never satisfied. It's that part in us that is never satisfied, continuously in search for something that is not here, always comparing this moment to another moment that doesn't really exist. I call it, there is the could be, should be, would be universe. You see? And accordingly, there is also the could be, should be, would be me. So I can never also accept myself. There's always something to improve. In short, now we are trapped in this kind of movement toward fixing something that we don't even know what we're trying to fix. Even when our conditions, exactly, because even when your conditions are perfect, you begin to produce this kind of problem consciousness. You see, so the thinking machine actually is only trying to protect you, but it has gone out of hand. You see, so now what we have is this kind of involuntary stream of thoughts, and beneath it, eternal problem consciousness and dissatisfaction. So this is where we are, and we need to begin to identify that it's not who we are, and it's not even personal. You see? And that's the key, that it's not really personal.
You articulated that so well, and I can feel exactly where we are. And I want to talk about the personalness and identity from this, because the thinking machine, I think there's a real crux in there. There is just this little one slide that I want to just tuck into the conversation here, which is, as you're sharing, I couldn't help but notice that the thinking machine was a tool for us as you were sharing the evolution of it. And somehow the tool has then it's been decoupled as a tool, and it's sort of running so much of our lives. And I even look, and it was just so easy to remark upon just how much a lot of the world is troubled by smartphone usage, AI, where it's going, because we don't have this capacity to manage our tools effectively. And there was just that parallel that I could sort of see even in the outer world, the way that we respond to our tools that we can see that are, causing our life some level of distress, mirrored by the inner tools that are also causing us distress. So I think from that point, the tools and the mind, and you mentioned, the ability to not take it personally, because it's not personal, not even not take it personally, because that involves some part of me still being in there to not do something about what's going on to me. Can you help unpick that entirely, and let's have the conversation around personality, identity?
Yes, of course. I'd love that. I just want to remark that when we speak about let's say social media and all these things we are worried about, that we are possessed by our own tools, our own self-created tools. It's very important to understand, for instance, if you consider Instagram or other image producing oriented platforms, this is only an extension of the thinking machine. So when we want to silence these platforms, we should remember the problem lies within. It's not in those platforms. You see, the one that created these platforms and the one that now seeks to use these platforms is our own dissatisfaction, our own constant comparison. So this is something that we need to remember. And now, you said, Yosef, I think we keep talking about something that is identifiable for all of us, right? And within all of us, because there is nothing personal about it. You see, we talk about dissatisfaction, I have it. Problem consciousness, I have it. You see, the constant need to improve my conditions and trying to control, I have it all, you see? And you too, and everyone else. And this is because the thinking machine is a sort of external phenomena, a collective phenomena that we have assimilated. You see, so now it is a mechanical.
Sorry. Can you say that again?
Yes, of course. The thinking machine is an external phenomena, a collective phenomena that we have assimilated.
Wow.
Yes, we have internalized it, and we don't have to internalize it. Actually, one of the practices that I recommend is beginning to visualize, and this happened to me after this kind of initial awakening experience at the age of 23, that I began to experience thoughts as something that hovers over my energy field, rather than an internal part of me, you see, a part of me. So I began to listen to thoughts as just as I would birds chirping on trees.
Mini clouds going by and the breeze.
Exactly. Wow. They're like a natural phenomena. So the thinking machine is a mechanical activity. It has persistent patterns, and therefore it is impersonal. That's why I call it the thinking machine and not my mind. You see, people always say, my mind gives me trouble, but this is not your mind. You see, it's a certain mechanical activity. So the first thing that you need to do is to learn to identify the patterns of the thinking machine, how it works. Why? Because you can never liberate yourself from something that you don't understand. You see? You have to understand its workings, how it is mechanical, and what it makes you think and feel, and how it also influences your body, your sensations. And second, begin to understand that this is not yours. Now, perhaps I don't want to talk too much. I just
Please, you're here to talk.
I don't want to give satsang. I want to have a conversation.
But please continue.
There's one important thing to understand, because I think here is the divide or the distinction between psychology and spirituality.
Oh,
you
wow,
see?
let's go there. Yeah, I'd love that.
Because psychology is all about deeply personalizing the content of your mind. You see, I have this kind of fear because of my childhood trauma. I now need to resolve my relationship with my parents. So it all becomes extremely personal. And please don't get me wrong, I don't reject psychology, and actually I've developed psycho-spiritual therapies. So I do believe in trauma healing and so on, but this shouldn't make us abandon this ultimately liberating perspective of meditation and true self-realization. And here spirituality tells us the very opposite. None of this is yours. None of this is personal. Stop personalizing it, because this is exactly the roots of your suffering. So perhaps psychology can help you to, I don't know, to alleviate your pain a little, but it cannot liberate you. So for this, you have to begin to radically approach your thinking as something that has absolutely no personal content and no personal value. This is where you begin to radically free yourself.
Wow. Psychology alleviates and spirituality liberates.
Right.
There was a thought that came to me the other day, and I have these crazy thoughts, and I know thoughts are just thoughts, and we're especially at this juncture of the conversation, but I think it wants to surface into this space, so I'll give it the airtime that it's seeking, which is, I was just contemplating whether, and I know this might trigger some people, so pardon me, it was literally just a thought, whether seeking spirituality for some of us is a form of a trauma response.
Seeking spirituality, please, could you elaborate?
So if for some of us, it's like we start going into seeking spirituality, we start looking for more, like to expand our awareness. And I wonder if for some of us, we've gone through a traumatic event and we lose the capacity to personalize the event that's happened to us, that then we sort of start seeking this, okay, I don't have the capacity to hold this event in my body, in my system, in my mind. And then as a trauma response, we potentially crack open and we start seeking further spirituality, which is then, like as you've described, we're actually seeking true liberation through our traumas. It's an interesting random thought I had. I just wonder, it just wanted to be surfaced here, so I'm just surfacing it and exploring it with you.
No, it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting direction. You see, I think that we also need to add to this a certain layer of insight, and that is the fact that very often our spirituality is driven by the wish to escape. You see, because of traumatic experiences, because of our realization that life is dangerous, that life is painful, then we are beginning to contemplate the possibility of the very opposite. You see, somewhere where we feel absolutely no pain, where we are completely free, when we are untainted by memory, by time, by experience. Now, this is good as well as an ignition, as a sort of initial motivating drive, but it cannot take you too far, because profound spirituality is actually one that becomes that makes you bigger than life, to a degree that you can embrace this life and actually put your both feet firmly on the ground and say, I'm here. I'm not going to escape. My home is everywhere in the universe because consciousness is everywhere. You see? So you actually, real spirituality is facing the danger of life, not avoiding it, not developing a certain fantasy. And one of the indications is that real spirituality doesn't make you hypersensitive. You see, Abby, because I've worked with people with so many people, and I've noticed this kind of phenomena that people grow so hypersensitive that they feel unable or too tender, too delicate to be exposed to life, to its demands,
to be part of the world. Yeah,
exactly. So they begin to develop to build their inner caves or the outer caves, and they want to be shielded. And I think that this is the very opposite of what spirituality is meant to give us, you see? Because you see, if that is true, then we don't need spirituality for the evolution of the race, because it doesn't help us to become bigger, stronger. It doesn't even show us how consciousness can contribute to human life, to life on Earth, right?
Integrate into this experience even deeper and in even richer ways. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that our role, if we're serious, is to demonstrate that spirituality can contribute to the evolution of the species. This is, I think, one of my jobs.
Well, it's actually one of the fundamental tenets of your work that I resonate so deeply with, and am most enamored isn't the right word. It's a kinship is almost is what I feel is the as I awaken, it's my sleeves get rolled up more and more to really get into the juices a little bit further of what life is about and is available. I do feel like at some point in the conversation, thank you so much for answering that, because I think that was a really profound takeaway in terms of how our relationship with just psychology and spirituality, and just the trauma and healing, and how that can be sort of, we can run towards spirituality as an escape, or we can actually run into our spirituality to meet life with an even bolder, empowered self. Exactly. I do feel like I took you onto a tangent of my own when we were discussing personality and spirituality in there. Understanding the difference between the two is fundamentally important. Alleviation versus liberation. Why is it so important when it comes to navigating our life, is the question.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Understanding the difference between what, like, psychology and spirituality. Why is it so important to be able to discern the two? And then how does that actually come together in your work? When we look at, you said psycho-spirituality and tools, and hopefully I'm sort of gearing us towards coming closer to what are some of the practices and tools that we can implement for the audience that's tuning in.
Yes. So basically, I think what you're asking is why do we need this perspective of the bigger consciousness, right? Because what we have right now is that we are trying to resolve our problems, including our psychological problems and psychosomatic disorders. We're trying to resolve them using, well, I have to quote Einstein. I'm sorry. I think sooner or later you have to quote Einstein, right? So he said, he beautifully put it, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking in which we created them. Now the thing is that we need some element that is bigger than our current mind. You see, right now, if I can give this kind of brief model, we have our physical mind, which is the brain. This is where we're caught right now. This is where the thinking machine governs our brain and patterns it in a certain way. And then beyond it, there is the mind. And then even beyond it, there is what we can call consciousness. And in between there are many different layers of consciousness that are much bigger than the activity of thinking. You see, you asked at the beginning about fear. So there are certain fields of consciousness in which fear cannot exist. You see, when you leap to these layers, you cannot have this kind of problem consciousness, this feeling that there is something that needs to be fixed, that you are afraid of death. You cannot even fear death because you are beyond thinking. So now I think that if we don't have this access, we're actually trapped in some kind of an eternal self-improvement journey. Yeah. And sometimes people tell me this with despair. This journey feels endless. For how long am I going to keep on working on my issues, on my patterns, trying to open my heart a little, trying to forgive a little, trying to move away from my traumas day by day, you see, with every day a little more. So the thing is that here I differentiate between what I call, well, I don't want to offend anyone, what I call the dirt track and the highway, you see.
Right.
The dirt track is this kind of road that is very tedious, that is endless actually, and that takes so long that you can hardly experience this kind of blissful total liberation from everything. And then there is the highway, and this is a journey that consists of continuous leaps from our ordinary state and our ordinary identity to broader states of consciousness. And that's why, by the way, I've created a certain method consisting of actually, well, more than 50 variations called the expansion method. And one of the most powerful elements or techniques of this method is the expansion for trauma. And you see what I do in this process is that I guide people. First of all, they need to somehow revisit their traumatic memory, which is always very difficult, painful, tearful. They don't want to return to that place.
Resistance,
and understandably so, because they do it from the same level on which the trauma was created in the first place. You see? So you cannot release yourself from a trauma while you're still on this level of thinking, in this dimension of perspective and experience. Now then, I lead them to higher states of consciousness using this kind of process of the expansion of consciousness, which is very systematic and simple actually. And then suddenly you ask them, now revisit your traumatic memory. And the first thing they tell you, what traumatic memory? And I'm not joking. They say, what are you talking about? I don't feel anything. And then I need to pull them somehow back and to remind them that well, these higher states of consciousness are not there as a form of escape. They are there for you to then be able to perceive the traumatic experience and to reorganize it, you see, to pour your presence, your conscious, your enlightened conscious into it, and to transform it radically, so radically to a degree that at the end of the session, the psychological content of the memory is eliminated. You see? And this is not because I'm not trying to boast or to tell you about the grandeur of the technique, but actually I want to focus on the power of higher consciousness.
And what's possible.
You see? Yes.
The expansion of our consciousness as a process, you said, is quite simple. It maybe is it somewhat difficult to run us through what that may look like, or is it possible to give us an idea of the systematic approach that you may take in that experience for the listener tuning in?
Oh, it's extremely simple, actually, and very joyful. Sometimes it works. This technique is at its best when you do it one-on-one, but you can also do it with yourself. What you do is that you're let's take for example the traumatic memory. I have a certain traumatic memory. Then I begin to recall this kind of memory. How I felt, what my thoughts were, what I perceived at that moment, how my body reacted, and then I begin to look for a certain identifiable pattern using my inner senses that captures this kind of memory. So first of all I look for the area in the body that reacts the most to this memory. Perhaps it is in the heart, perhaps it is in the head, in the forehead, in the hands, in the belly, wherever it is. There's always a certain area in the body that responds the most. And this is actually related to our chakra system. So then you look, using your inner senses, you seek to identify some kind of image or shape that is related to this kind of memory. Whatever arises in you, it's not so important. It doesn't have to be the ultimate image or shape. Then a color, a general sensation, and even a fragrance. And then you label it using a word or two. You see, it can be unfathomable sadness or frozen life, for instance. So let's say I have frozen life in the form of a hard rock within my solar plexus area, and it is completely stiff, and it is a dark blue. That's just an example. You see, now I begin to breathe into this pattern. I breathe into it, and I let it spread and permeate my entire body and being. Now, this is the very opposite direction, you see, because usually we want our memory to shrink, to disappear. We don't want to feel it. But that's the paradoxical power of expanded consciousness. You need to open it up in order to spiritualize it. So then you're beginning to breathe into it and to let it grow and expand until it reaches its maximal level, until it cannot expand anymore. And you ask this pattern, this image, to show itself completely to you. Now, what happens when you are really opening it up is that it moves from a contracted state to a more spiritualized and subtle state, and it begins to lead you through subtler levels of consciousness. Now, this one time of expansion is not enough, especially when it comes to traumatic or difficult memories or difficult emotions, deep-seated emotions. So then you repeat this process, you see. Now you examine again, okay, so now what has happened to the expanded rock-like tension in my solar plexus? Now it has become subtler, more delicate, but I expand it nevertheless, you see. Again, shape, image, general sensation, color, and I expand it over and over again, even 3 or 4 or 5 times. And at a certain point, I'm finding myself, this is the shocking moment, and such a blissful relief. You're realizing that your terrible memory has been transformed into bliss, light, infinity, sometimes even God. People use these words. Sometimes they call it white light. And then suddenly you have used this kind of contracted state for the paradoxical goal of the expansion of your consciousness, you see? So it's like riding the wave. You're not resisting anything. You're simply letting everything expand because everything in us wants to expand. You see, even the universe is expanding, they say, right?
Wow, Shai, thank you so much for guiding us through that. That's really incredible. Really incredible. I was following along as you were sharing and working with something that wants to contract, allowing it to expand is such, as you mentioned, it's counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive. But
Right.
once you start to work with it, it's exactly like fear. Actually, I realized even in setting up the inspired evolution, all the things that are available to me on this particular path, every time I fear, and it's like you sort of just go in with a little bit of like, oh, let's just see what happens if I work with it, and then it starts to expand, and you're like, oh, I was afraid of that. Like this is a gift, Like it's so incredible how yeah.
Yes, but do you see what happens when we fear? When you are afraid of your fear, it actually gets hold of you. It has power over you. But when you say, sit one day and say, okay, come on, all my subconscious, I invite you to surface. I'm not afraid of any of my inner contents. I want to really get to know what lies deep within my being. And as soon as you're unafraid of yourself, suddenly you realize that there's not so much there, you see? There are no monsters and demons there. It's actually, it's tiny, frightened thoughts and feelings that actually want to be redeemed by you. They wait for you to redeem them.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's almost like they're beckoning you, inviting you to come do the work. Yeah.
Right.
That takes me to a point which I wanted to discuss today as well, which was, and I think we've been dancing around this quite a bit. The fact that you mentioned it's our minds don't actually become silent, which is oftentimes our expectation through these spiritual practices and mindfulness and meditation and even this healing work. In fact, we can become silent, but it's somewhat erroneous to even think about the mind going silent because it's not in its nature. Can you?
What an important point you're bringing. Yes, because this is one of the greatest traps on our spiritual journey is attempting to silence our mind. You see, well, to begin with, this is not your mind, so you cannot silence it, and you don't have to silence it because it's not your problem. You see, this is not your job to silence something that you do not possess. So now what happens is that first I personalize my mind, then I try to silence it. As soon as I try to silence it, this creates a certain divide, a certain split within my being. There is the silencer, right? And the thoughts that we try to silence. And we begin to, we experience actually this kind of inner split. We are two, not one. You see? Now, consciousness never works this way because it never creates this kind of division. Consciousness includes, it doesn't go against. So this is how you identify whether it's your thinking that simply produces this kind of strange struggle, dividing itself, you see, and then fighting itself. So when you want to take the peaceful path, the path of consciousness, you understand that you only need to see thoughts as they are, you see. That's what I call the law of attention. If you don't give meaning and importance to your thoughts, then you actually no longer need to struggle with them. You see? Because well, there is no independent power to thoughts. Thoughts don't possess an independent existence. Therefore, you only need to tag them. You need to even generalize them. Sometimes the Buddhists do it very beautifully. They don't begin to analyze their anger or desire their specific desire. Now desire, I don't know, for a woman or for a car or for a happy life or whatever, they simply label it desire. Now what they do when they do this is that they make it unimportant or insignificant. You know that I've lately read something very interesting, that one of the pieces of advice given to people who suffer from oversensitive hearing is that they should simply label external noises, the external sounds they deem disturbing, unimportant. You see, it's unimportant. So now, when you say this is unimportant, this has no meaningful content, you finally let your mind be, or let the mind be, and you let yourself be. You stop reacting, and therefore you stop wasting your energy. You see? Now, when you stop reacting, and then you're naturally beginning to withdraw into this kind of natural, effortless silence that is who you already are. This is not a silence that you produce. If you try to silence the mind, it's a self-produced silence that will anyway go away. But the silence that is who you are can never go away. You see, because it's you. How can you go away, right? Yeah. That's the free, happy, blissful insight that I had at the age of 23, and then I realized, well, nothing can take it away from me because it's me. You see, then you no longer depend on experiences, on the rise and fall of your spiritual, mystical experiences.
For you to have to respond positively or negatively towards to drive meaning for your experience. Yeah,
exactly.
There's a split that you described in there, which is really powerful for us to recognize. And then you also mentioned the law of attention. So I'm just going to use that and look at it from another lens as well, which is you've also mentioned, and this really sort of caused me pause to reflect, and I'm still reflecting on this one. So I'm just going to reflect on it with you here, because I think a big part of the inspired evolution, when I think about it, ultimately, I've found myself guilty of asking this question this way, which is like, when you think about the inspired evolution and, you know, what do you see for yourself and what is brighter for your tomorrow? And it's interesting because I'm inviting the person to think about a brighter tomorrow. And in your work, you said, yeah, but every time you're contemplating the future in that kind of way, you're building an image in your mind and you're actually encouraging yourself to be consistently incomplete in the present moment. And this is another split, not too dissimilar to the one we were discussing. Am I right? Can you expound upon that a little bit, please?
Well, that's a really profound point, because what you're saying is that we're talking about evolution in terms of future, right? Evolution in terms of the future that we hope to create.
There's always a promise. There's always a promise in that hope somehow, like that we rest into, I feel. And I feel myself doing it, you know. And yeah, but then also following that, potentially that's another split from being.
Yes, exactly. And this is you see that I think our problem also as humanity, if I needed to pinpoint humanity's problem, and really, I would say that it's the problem of waiting. You see, we always wait. We wait, and then we die. That's basically the story of our life. So we always wait for this one day in which we are going to become fulfilled, to become happy, to finally have a meaningful life. And we're always building toward that moment, you see? That never comes. Now, it never comes because well, meaning or truthfulness or fulfillment, they can never be realized in the future. I think this is why I don't think, when I think of inspired evolution, I don't think in terms of the future, because think of it for a moment, the future is some kind of a linear building toward, right? Step by step. I'm thinking about expansion. that's a very different movement. You see, it's expansion means that the core is here and it grows and grows and grows from this very moment. So now when you have this kind of different perception and different experience of your evolution, it's not about this kind of time-bound building brick by brick toward the promised future. It's actually imbuing your present and with meaning and with profound meaning, and from this moment, from this nowness, you are then beginning to create the next step. You see, it's like it's a natural, it's an organic development that arises from the moment. So I never think about the future. You see, for me, there is no future. And I think our tragedy as humanity is that we're always talking about this promised future that and it's not going to be there because we've actually neglected our present. Do you understand?
Absolutely, and I can see the neuroses on it on a collective level as well, because in order to build a better tomorrow, we're almost raping and pillaging the earth in certain ways that aren't supportive for itself, because there's a better tomorrow coming towards us through the actions we're taking in the now, and yet somehow we're able to reconcile that for the promise of a better tomorrow when really it doesn't feel good now and it doesn't seem right now, and yet we're still ploughing on ahead because of the collective thinking machine that we've assimilated.
Yes, exactly. Yes, because you see, one of my questions is that I observe how humanity right now is really troubled by one, the rise of artificial intelligence, right? Because this raises concerns, and two, the ecological crisis. Right, but we always speak about these problems in terms of the future of humanity, and then I keep asking myself, but what for? Why do we want to preserve humanity so much? Is it only to continue to survive? You see, our problem, for me, is the problem of meaning. We don't have any kind of meaningful evolution that we're talking about. And I think that artificial intelligence actually now challenges our identity and our meaning as human beings. And we really need to embrace this and to ask ourselves, well, what is it that we want to preserve? You see? What? More technological development? We have enough of it. I mean, we can never have enough of it. It's always interesting, fascinating. But human beings, as we are, we have remained the same. For eons, for centuries, we are psychologically the same. Where is our consciousness? You see,
which is the bedrock of how we experience this entire thing we call reality. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm conscious of how much time we have left, and I hate saying that question. I shouldn't hate, but I hate saying that question. One of the questions I had that I can't let you go without answering is in the realm of, and I think this question is somewhat redundant now, but I would still like to just get it answered because I've got a few people in my audience, especially in the inner circle of the Inspired Evolution, that I know would really benefit from the answer of this question, which is when you mentioned before that personality is working with your personality, working with psychology can help you alleviate, working with spirituality can help you liberate. Now, in there, we were discussing, coming into that, the identity piece. Now, oftentimes, I have come to a juncture where, and those in the inner circle of the Inspired Evolution, where we start to look at, okay, if I really want to take my life to the next level, and I know in this conversation that seems moot, but honoring the question anyway, is if I want to take my life to the next level, the opportunity actually lies within me creating an identity shift. And yet what I'm taking away from this conversation is that is you just playing a game with yourself, spinning the wheel in the mud, when really let yourself go. Is that the advice? Yeah,
that's beautiful. Well, we don't have to create an identity. You see, I think the problem of our age is that people keep trying to invent themselves, you see, but by inventing yourself, you're trying to become something that you're not already are.
More splits.
Exactly. More self-image, more objectifying yourself, treating yourself as if you were some kind of an external phenomena that can be observed by yourself and by others. We are not products, you see. The thing is that this is what the sages of all mystical traditions have told us since the beginning of time. It's not about creating an identity, it's about revealing an identity. So what we need to do is actually to lift the veils. We need to remove the veils and to begin to look into ourselves, into who we already are, because, well, who we already are, well, it surpasses all identities, you see. And the thing is that, and this is one of the statements that are perhaps most radical, is that understanding that when you reveal your broader identity, everything changes with it. You see, if we keep trying to work on or improving certain patterns, certain behaviors, reinventing who we are and how we, whether we are our confidence, building our confidence, improving our skill of love and compassion, all that. This is again the dirt track, but the highway is all about taking these leaps to broader and higher identity that we already possess, that we already are, and then from these leaps realizing how everything in life is changing as a result. You see, life follows, your reality follows who you think you are. That's the principle.
And allow ourselves to not need to associate with a thinking machine in that process.
Oh yes, because the thinking machine belongs to a certain very limited identity that is also related to our identity as body and mind in time and space, bound to die, and continuously shaped by our circumstances, by history, by our past. This makes us prone to the thinking machine, to its power.
And it gives our power away. Another split. Shai, I have to ask you, what is your prayer for? Obviously, you're doing this. We discussed in the beginning the path that you availed itself to you is either that to be the renunciate or to roll your sleeves up and be of service. And you've rolled your sleeves up, and I can see there's not much sleeve left with how much you've rolled them up, to be honest. And I'm really, really, really grateful for that. And I'm sure it's not just me. Many people tuning into this episode have, deeply connected to your work and get a lot from it. And just on behalf of all of us, I'd love to hear from you. What is your prayer for humanity and the planet and consciousness? And what do you see as a possibility for us? Why you do the work you do the way that you do it?
What is my prayer for humanity? That's a big question. Well, I think my prayer is that humanity will discover that it's not only body and mind, that it's not some kind of a mechanism, a machine that is doomed, or that is limited to mechanical reactions, and that we will be able to discover one day not only the mystics among us, to discover the power of our consciousness and its relevance to our human life. You see, because my prayer is that spiritual leaders will finally be able to show us, to demonstrate that consciousness is the most urgent ingredient that we need to develop in order to transform our relationship with the planet, our relationship with ourselves, and to begin to create our present, not our future.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shai. And for those that are tuning in, on behalf of the entire audience, myself, Shai, I could totally take a moment to thank you here for this conversation today, but I think that does it absolutely no justice. Obviously, this is a lifetime's worth of work and potentially multiple lifetimes worth of work that we get to revel in this conversation. So I just really want to deeply thank you for who you are and the work you're doing in the world. Thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly here with us today.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for your questions and for your passion and for your for your genuine love of truth, because that's rare. When there is love of truth, you have everything.
Oh, touch wood. Thank you so much for that reflection, Shai. Last little bit, for those that want to tune into more, you run silent retreats. There's a whole bunch of work on YouTube. I know you do. There's workshops and seminars that you help people with. What is for those that are looking to dive deeper into Shai? Obviously, you guys are watching a YouTube video, listening to an audio podcast now, so YouTube is really easy to connect to Shai's work. And like I said, there's some amazing satsangs. But from yourself personally, do you think, where would you like to invite people to, or to check out more about what's available to them in this expanding consciousness?
I think you've mentioned it. The best way is to simply enter the YouTube channel, because I think it's really abundant with videos, including guided meditations and numerous videos explaining how to integrate the spiritual perspective into our life. So I think that's the where I would start.
Perfect. Guys, you heard it here first. We'll put links to Shai's channel in the show notes below for you guys to go check out. And yeah, the big takeaway for me today was also the difference between psychology and spirituality. One alleviates, one liberates. Neither are wrong, neither is better than the other. And also that real spirituality doesn't actually leave you feeling more and more sensitive or more fragile. Actually, you become more of a beast. You can roll your sleeves up and you are actually even more integrated and able to face life with your center nice and strong. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You listened to this episode all the way to the end. We appreciate you so much with all of our hearts. Thank you, Inspired Evolution Tribe and audience. It is our greatest honor to be your brothers walking home by your side. As always, stay inspired. Keep evolving. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to its end. Obviously, you absolutely love this podcast, and I want to thank you so much for watching this all the way through. Here is another video that's perfectly curated just for you to watch as the next best video to keep your inspiration flowing, to keep you evolving, to keep you. Check it out now.